Hello, everyone. This is Howard Fox, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series, the podcast that celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Today's a special episode because I get to spend it with two gentlemen who I have gotten to know over I'd say about the past 4 years. We are all members of the Outdoor Writers Association of America, and we each have our special niches. First off, I want to introduce you to Clay Abney. Clay is a public relations professional and freelance outdoor adventure and travel writer, and his motto is explore the world one adventure at a time, which I truly appreciate because it means he's not at his desk. Now, joining us is another really special individual, very talented. He's also a fellow podcaster, Rick Saez, and Rick's podcast is the Outdoor Biz Podcast. And I met Rick 4 years ago up in Jay Peak, Vermont, and we have tolerated each other ever since. A little competition going on every once in a while, but really a great guy. Clay's a great guy, and again, I can't think of a better way to spend some time on a hot Tuesday in Las Vegas. So, hey guys, how you doing?
Awesome.
Good.
Glad to be here.
Yeah,
excellent.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Howard.
Very good.
Fun.
Well, for our listeners, typically it will be like a total interview format, but I think we're just, as Rick says, just going to kind of spitball it a bit today and just really want to dive into Clay and his background, because and I have to say, for one thing, Clay, thank you. You helped outfit me, as did Rick, by the way. I can't shortchange Rick. You helped to outfit me on my recent trip to Alaska, because I'm the type of guy that's going to fill my suitcase and then some with stuff I will never wear. So I want to thank you both. Before we kind of dive in, Clay, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about your background than what I did during this introduction?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I started out my writing career more as a gear tester and just gear reviewer, and then it kind of snowballed into more travel writing. Then I just started using the gear that I had been testing and continued to test on more adventures, and those adventures have taken me to Greenland, Antarctica, and a lot of places in between.
Excellent. Now, a quick question, and for our listeners, behind Clay is this wonderful photo of, thank you, he's moving away from it, this wonderful photo of a small little iceberg, and he is framed in the middle of the iceberg and its reflection on the water. He's in a red kayak. So you've been in some pretty amazing places, testing out some gears and getting some experiences. So that must be pretty special to have that kind of experience.
I was actually really fortunate on that particular trip to Southeast Greenland because it was just me and then two photographers. And as photographers, they needed people to frame up into the shot. So I got to be in a lot of shots because two photographers and one guy that was free to roam, and just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And those guys ended up with a lot of great shots, and I kind of reaped the benefits as well.
I love it. So you were kind of the model there.
I guess, for lack of a better term.
All right. All
The
right.
talent. Here's the talent.
He is the talent. Now, Rick, have you been in some amazing spots like Greenland with some of your outdoor adventures?
Yeah, I haven't been to Greenland and I haven't been to Australia. The only places I have not been in the world, continent-wise or country-wise. But yeah, I have some great fortune to run rivers in Alaska, like the Tatshenshini, and go kayaking like that in Baja, California, and hiking all over the world. So I've been a lucky guy. Yeah, it's super fun. It's been a fun life.
I love it. Now, you have a gear kind of connection as well in one of your earlier career iterations. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I basically have worked in the outdoor industry my entire life. I started out right out of high school, right out of college, working as a river guide and at a sixth grade outdoor camp, and then got into retail while I was doing that, and slowly worked my way up and through a bunch of brands. I was with Eagle Creek for 10 years as a sales guy. I worked at Dana Design, led Dana Design for a couple of years, Jansport as a product manager, Low Pro as a product manager. So really had a great career in the outdoor space, selling product and gear, designing and creating product and gear. It's super fun.
I'm curious, what's different about the industries and the products today versus when you were just starting out?
Well, I think the materials are a lot better. The materials have come a long way. They're a much lighter weight. I mean, we were basically working with Cordura back in the day. Everything was made out of Cordura, not jackets, but and Cordura, the Cordura we were working with is pretty heavy. So there's a lot of lightweight stop nylons for backpacks and luggage and duffel bags. The footwear has gotten incredible. It's just as light as a feather. I mean, I remember the first pair of boots I had. They were like army boots. I mean, they weighed a ton and they hurt your
Big
feet.
lug soles on them.
Yep, huge
And
soles,
it
big.
took about a month to break them in, wearing them every day, just or a little bit every day until they were finally started to give a little
Yep.
bit.
I was gonna say that stiff leather that took you like a month to break in. Yeah, yeah,
And now they're user ready right out of the box.
yeah.
Which
And
is
they fit like tennis shoes. They're running shoes. They're
absolutely.
amazing. Yeah, yeah.
So there's really no, for the most part, break it in period. You just put your foot in and you're good to go, at least with the shoes.
Pretty much. I was interviewing a couple guys that are athletes sponsored by Loa Boots, and Loa Boots came out with a set of like kind of like cross training footwear the other day, and these guys were doing some huge cross training multi-day thing, and they wore them right out of the box, no problem.
I love it. Now, Clay, when you were first starting out and you were going on these travel experiences and doing the writing, how did you go about getting the equipment for your excursion so you could test it out in the field?
Well, I'll even go back a little bit further than that. And I started backpacking as a Boy Scout, and we didn't
Ah,
we didn't have the technical apparel, the technical gear. I mean, we for thunderstorms in the southeast, we just wore a poncho. It covered us. It covered the pack. Now I have a pack, and I put the pack liner down inside of it, and I put everything. And I don't have to worry about carrying the pack cover. And when I wear my technical jacket, but there's still a lot to be said about a good old poncho on a hot summer steamy day, because you're got a little bit more airflow underneath you. So I still, depending on the time of the year, I still carry that poncho, but now I actually have access to a lot more of the technical apparel. And in the early days, I bought my own stuff. I remember I got my first, in 1992, I got my first Gore-Tex Pack Light jacket and pants for a trip I was taking out to, for about a month-long trip out to Colorado and New Mexico. And yeah, I mean, matter of fact, the pants are somewhere still in the house. I think I gave the jacket to my dad ultimately, and he's my brother and my nephews and my dad have all reaped the benefits from excessive gear. Because as I've started testing it, companies would send stuff to me for stories that I was doing roundups on, and everything from boots to packs to mountain bikes and stand-up paddle boards, a little bit of everything.
what has been one of the pieces of equipment that you were, I wouldn't say the word is gifted, but sent so that you could take it out into the field and incorporate it into your story? What was one in your, some of the previous work, your most memorable piece of equipment?
I think as Rick said, I think it's just the evolution of it. It's not really been necessarily one piece of gear, because you're not talking, uh, this is over 40 years. I think I started backpacking, 40 something years ago as a young, 12-year-old. So a lot of that has evolved, and backpacks that used to weigh, expedition pack used to weigh 7 pounds or so. Now you can get packs now that weigh just a couple of pounds. The durability of the fabric, and even the Gore-Tex was so much heavier back then, just because, I mean, everything was so heavier. And then the boots, I remember I took my nephews to Peru for a month, when they graduated high school. And, case in point is one of my nephews, I sent them the boots over a month ahead of time so that they could wear them. And two of them actually did wear theirs, but the third one opted to, literally the day before we left, his boots were still in the trunk of his car, and they
Oh
were
boy.
still in the box, and they had never been taken out.
Oh
So
boy.
he put them on just the day, I think he wore them, I think, to the airport or something. So that was his first foray. But again, he didn't have any blisters. He didn't have any because they fit just yeah,
Hmm.
so much different than my early days of backpacking where you got boots and you would literally walk around with a pack around the neighborhood for incrementally just adding to it so that the boots would break in.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I remember my first pair of hiking boots. They caused horrible blisters. It was brutal.
Yeah. I'm not going to, I'm going to say this name because I know that they've evolved as well. But my first boots were, I think were Danner, and they were these big, huge lug, and they had huge lug soles on them, and they literally took a long time
Yeah,
to break.
stiff, heavy. Yeah, yeah.
They were stiff, they were heavy, and you literally had to, and you would rub some of the lotion thing on it to keep it, to help kind of break it in just a little bit. But the only way to really break them in was just to wear 'em.
Yep.
Had
Wow.
to walk a mile the first time and then a mile and a quarter or a mile and a half. It would just keep adding to it until that you could walk 4 or 5 miles and not have any hot spots and any of those things, and try to address them early and sometimes early and often.
So I had a question. Going to Alaska, and as I was doing my research, and again, thank you to you both for offering some sage advice. Uh, I was researching what type of boots do I need in Alaska because I knew it was going to be wet. And there was these, they call them the Alaska boot. I forget the exact brand, but there was absolutely no arch support. Nobody said I should put the orthotics, the foot ins,
Got the insole.
the
Footbed, yeah.
insole,
Footbed, yeah.
which was a game changer when I had it in the second day. But all I could imagine, anytime I went out on the shore, I was slipping and sliding. But this is what everybody was saying you ought to buy when you're going to Alaska, so you wouldn't look like a total tourist.
Hmm.
So what do you?
I
And, and
I was
I
gonna
don't
say,
know
when I
which
went
ones
to
you're
Alaska,
talking about, but it sounds like more like rain boots. Did they come up past your
Yeah.
calf?
Yeah, they were rain boots.
Yeah, they're just, I mean, I think it's just so that they can disinfect them when they come back onto the boat. And so that you're not we did that in Antarctica where you would put them on and then you had to step on something and then you rinsed it off when you came back on so that you weren't transferring bacteria and stuff from one, like in Antarctica, it was transferring it from one penguin colony to the next.
Okay.
That you weren't cross-contaminating these areas, and it makes them easier to clean. Whereas leather boots and stuff like that would hold on to it, and it'd be harder to disinfect from point A to point B.
Okay. So
we did
I
the same
never.
thing in Alaska and Antarctica, both. Even on the river trips in Alaska, we didn't wear normal hiking footwear. It was those big Alaska tennis shoes, they called them, or something. These big
Yeah.
over up to your knee rubber boots, and it was mainly for the weather. I mean, you didn't want to get wet, you didn't want to get muddy because all along the ground was wet and muddy, and you weren't hiking necessarily. You weren't walking that much. I think a couple times in Antarctica, any hikes that we did we did have proper footwear. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
with
They on the bushwhacking, and they had a day tour. That's pretty much what the guests were wearing, were these big obnoxious. And I just couldn't imagine how uncomfortable they were. I would want to get into the hot tub just so my feet could get some nice warm weather. How do you prepare for? You guys have both gone on some excursions, a lot more exciting than the ones I had been on. But how do you begin to prepare a list of, this is the type of shoe I need, this is the type of coat I should take, or what's that piece of equipment that nobody tells you, but you really needed to take it? Like I never thought to have a pair of neoprene gloves when I was going kayaking. I just had my Columbia gloves, which got wet, which was not a happy feeling. Uh, but how do you begin some of your adventures, Clay, when you've had some pretty unique destinations, and I hope you'll share a couple of those, but how do you begin to plan what you're going to bring for kind of a destination like Greenland behind you? What did you have to do to plan that out?
Well, if you're going with an outfitter, a lot of times, and Rick can probably attest to that on some of the river rafting trips and stuff like that, is they usually send you a list. And a lot of times, maybe even an example, or we prefer the NRS particular like gloves, or or so forth. But I mean, I guess if you're going on, I think the one that you went on recently to Alaska was more of just a day. You just kind of went off the boat on day tours or excursions, where you weren't like, whereas in Greenland, we were off the grid. Matter of fact, I saw less people in Greenland than I saw in Antarctica because I was on a expedition cruise ship down there. So I had couple hundred people, as opposed to, I think it was just a guide, 2 photographers, and myself, and most of our time in Greenland. So a lot of it just comes down to, like, look at me. We have access to it. Back in when I first started in, you went to the pages of Backpacker and Outside Magazine, and you look to see what these other people. Now there's a wealth of information online, and even podcasts like this one, where you can kind of glean information from experts and people that have been doing it for a long time. So you don't really have to, sometimes it was a sufferfest. You get out there on a hot summer trip or a cold winter trip, and you didn't have everything that you needed, and you struggled, but it kind of made you stronger for it.
I love it. And, into their, I'm not going to not benefit or defense, but the trip that I did take to Alaska, they did have a checklist. Now, I still had to do a little bit of research. Like, I have no idea what that is. So, I had to do that. Rick, is that pretty much been your experience as well?
Yeah, most outfitters these days send you a pretty detailed list, and you just buy what's on the list. But Clay is right. There's so much. The internet has so much information. You can go research other trips. You can go look at pictures of people now to see what they're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And you always have to be wary when you get to the place that you got to be cognizant of the weather. I was in Nepal. We were going to run the Karnali River in Nepal, which was a 2-day walk to get to the put-in. And it was, you're on this river and you're on the river for 5 days. There's no walking out. It was these steep canyons, beautiful trip. But, and we're sitting around the pre-trip meeting. This was with Sobek. And the guides had just been over there the last week. And they said, oh, yeah, you don't need your rain gear. You don't need this. You don't need that. It's harder than hell, blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at my buddy there, another Sobek guy sitting there. And I says, I don't know about you, but I'm taking my rain gear. And he says, yeah, me too. And a bunch of people left it. And sure enough, we got to the put-in, and the first day was beautiful. The second day we woke up to rain, and it rained for like 3 days straight. The water came up really high. The rapids went from class 4 to class 5 plus. It just was crazy. And we had people get sick and wet and all these things. So you got to be prepared for everything, and don't let anybody talk you out of leaving anything behind, because you never know when things are going to change.
It's easier to stay warm than it is to get warm once you get cold.
That's right.
Well, and that
dry.
was a great piece of advice I think you both had shared with me, because again, I have not been in this type of experience before, where even the half day, full day excursions, that was new to me. But layers, I mean, the base layer, the mid layer, the top layer, and little did I know there's even variations in quality of those, each one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And that was crucial. I don't think I was ever, I mean, we had wonderful weather. We had rain. It was cool, but I don't think I was, except for the gloves when I was kayaking, and I just went and bought a pair on the ship that day. But I don't think I was ever uncomfortable while I was on this ship for the week. So that's got to be a bad experience when you're not prepared. When you're
That
out
gives you
off
stories
the
to
grid.
tell, though. You have stories to tell. You got to be out there. I think that you got to experience full conditions once in your life somewhere, because it creates a whole different, Clay, you can attest to this, a whole different adventure, right? A whole different activity, because it just, all these other things you got to be careful of, and making fire when it's wet, that's a whole challenge, cooking. So yeah.
Every memory is attached to an emotion, right? And so if you're cold, you're going to remember that, as opposed to if everything were just perfect. You wouldn't necessarily, I mean, you might remember the scenery, you might remember the landscape, but you might not remember that a particular story. But if you're sitting there and your hands are cold from kayaking, well, you're going to remember it. Well, I might have been a little bit miserable, but it attached so many more emotions, so many more memories that you'll remember more fondly looking back after you've gotten the feeling back into your fingers. And anybody that's spent enough time in the backcountry or the outdoors has had those miserable moments. But, the miserable moments are trumped by the great moments.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. Very insightful. So I'm curious, Clay, as far as your travels, I mean, you've been to some amazing places. Again, the photo behind you that's up on the wall. What has been one of your most unique travel experiences or destinations that you just like, wow, I can't believe I was here?
Well, I will say, like, what do the kids say? FOMO, got the fear of missing out. A couple of years ago, I was in had traveled all through Colorado. I was doing all of Colorado's non-snow related activities, kind of with Colorado tourism. And I was toward the end of my trip and I was doing Long's Peak, and I was coming down off of Long's Peak and I stepped in between two rocks, and the rock under that was supporting those two shifted and I heard a loud pop.
Mm,
And, after the wave of nausea passed, and I looked at it, and I had a Colorado tourism had set me up with a guide, and he looked at it, and I was like, "Oh man, this is just a sprain. Everything's fine. We did wrapped it up with a ace wrap, and then put the sock back on, and then tightened the boots down, and then navigated the boulder field, because I was only a couple hundred feet below the summit coming down. And then after I got down off the boulder field, and then we hiked 7 or so miles out of Rocky Mountain National Park. And then it was the next day I went to an orthopedic there in Estes Park, and he told me it was broke, and I hadn't even told my wife at the time. And I called her and I said, "I've got good news and I've got bad news." She said, "Well, what's the bad news?" I said, "Well, I've broke my ankle." And I can literally hear her every time. It's like, "Oh my God, what is the good news?" I said, "Well, the doctor said I can go to the Yukon." And so 2.5 weeks later, I literally left boot and all that ran up to my knee. I went to the Yukon and stand-up paddleboarded 140 miles down the Yukon River from right outside of Whitehorse all the way down to Carmax. And I would put the big boot in a dry bag every day, and I would put on a air cast for the 6 to 10 hours a day on the river. And I think it was because of that. Again, I could have missed out on an opportunity. If it had been a backpacking trip or a mountain biking trip, I couldn't have done it. But because I was standing up on a stand-up paddleboard, and every day we got off the river, I'd put the big boot back on and walk around camp and sit and watch the northern lights. And so it was an amazing trip. So it was a one to remember. Of course, I base it all on, there's so many great ones, but I took my 3 nephews to Peru. So I got to spend a month with my brother's 3 oldest, and then are going and spending 2 weeks navigating across Austria with my wife for our 20th anniversary. Everything's got like different emotions attached to them depending on the scenario. I don't
mhm.
really say I have a favorite trip. I just always say, people ask me, "Where's your favorite place you've been?" I always generally say my next one.
There you go.
Yep.
I love that. I love that. Rick, how about you? Paul, I mean, I don't think you can beat that, but maybe you have. Uh, what's been the most memorable for you?
Yeah, the Nepal one is the most memorable for the it was a real true adventure. A lot of times you go on these trips and they're adventure travel trips and there's adventure built in, but sometimes it can be a rather soft adventure. But, when something goes wrong, then you're really in it, right? It's full conditions. You got to deal with some stuff, you got to plan, you got to think. So that was really a full conditions adventure. And I've been in a bunch of weather elsewhere, but the other one for me was Antarctica. I mean, just because the scenery down there was just incredible. I got to go on another Sobek trip. We were on a 150-foot vessel, which was really small. So riding some of the waves and the currents and things was pretty exciting. But it let us go in little niche places where we could see the penguins and the wildlife and the ice and things. It was just from a landscape perspective, it was just like another world. And so those are the two that really stick out in my mind. There's so many others, but those are the two, one
Okay.
and two, or 2 and 1, or whatever. However, it was one
All
and one
right.
A.
I love you guys sharing that. And as I kind of look back and think, I would really have to say Alaska right now, because I've been to Austria. I've been to Europe, Istanbul, Greece. I mean, to be sitting alongside the Parthenon, having a bottle of water, just looking at it, that's a pretty amazing thing to do. But the ship outdoor adventures, excuse me, on cruise adventures, that was the cruise line. I mean, these are small cruise ships that were able to get up into some of these fjords that these which I know they were small cruise ships like the Carnivals and the Norwegian cruise lines. Those are big ships, but they're still small enough to be traveling through Alaska. But on Cruise Adventures and their little ships, they got into some amazing places that the average ship couldn't even get to. And I just being able to see a glacier calving and the sound it made when it did it, it's like, wow, that was pretty special. So it's but I hope I get some adventures like you guys. I don't know if I could. Well, I'd get in a kayak again. Now that I've done it a couple of times, I'm ready to do some more kayaking. I don't know about stand-up paddleboarding. I think I'll have some more overboard adventures on that one. Trying to get it back up on the board.
Well, it's not like snowboarding. If you get the snowpack, I mean, it's hard. But
Yeah.
if it's summer and the water's warm, what's the worst that happens is you get wet.
Okay.
You just
All
crawl
right.
back up on it and stand back up, stand, sit, or kneel. I mean, a bad day on the water is better than a good day at work, right?
That's right. That's right.
Very much so. Very
A
much
bad
so.
day anywhere is better than a good day at work. The
When you guys have
backyard.
been when you guys have been out on these excursions, what kind of food were you eating? Because I know food, even the food has changed a lot these days from way back 20, 30 years ago. And there's another member of the Outdoor Writers Association of America, Steve Corso, and I think he's going to be speaking in El Paso at the national conference. He's got a whole website and show.
Outdoor eats.
Yeah, Outdoor Eats.
Mhm.
And it's all geared towards making your food enjoyable and healthy. But what's changed food wise, or what's the most interesting thing you guys have eaten while you've been out in the field? Clay, why don't you start us off there?
Well, there used to not be a lot of options. I think the biggest thing now is there are actually a lot of options and a lot more palatable meals than there ever used to be. And I think there's Backpackers Pantry and Mountain House, and some of those in the freeze dried, and then there's some others that are doing the dehydrated. And there's a difference between the dehydrated and freeze dried. And I think there's just a lot more that you can. There's just a lot more options. Of course, I always carry a small bottle of Tabasco sauce to flavor up anything else, because anything can be palatable if you add a little bit more spice to it.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. I learned years ago as a guide to not take any backpacking pantry or any of that stuff. It's so easy to go into the supermarket and find healthy options, not only healthy options, but quick and easy options. And if you have a proper cookware and a good stove and all those things, on a river trip, you can carry Dutch ovens and full burner stoves, so you can cook like you're cooking at home. I had cioppino on the Tachincini River, which was fantastic. We stopped in Anchorage, I think it was, or Juneau maybe, I forget, and just bought a bunch of great seafood. We had the guys from a world famous photographer, Michio Hoshino. He's since passed. He was killed by a bear, unfortunately, but he was an amazing photographer, and he had some people with him that just made the best cioppino I ever had in my life on the banks of the Tachincini. So you can cook anything outdoors if you have the proper cookware, and which has come a long ways, as Clay knows too, over the years. I mean, it's not these heavy things. The stoves are amazing. So don't think you have to rely on Backpackers Pantry. I always have a couple of those in the bag just in case of emergency, but I try to eat fresh food and cook along the way.
That's why
Are
I've
you-
actually gravitated towards a lot more of the float trips now, the stand-up paddle boards, the kayak, because you can carry a lot more.
Yeah.
When you're not having to carry it on your back, it's so
Yeah.
much more, you can carry much more options. And even on a stand-up paddleboard on our Yukon, food barrels that are bear proof and whatever else. So you can carry food, and it will actually hold for multiple days. They'd have fresh food and be able to have steak, to have fish, to have fresh potatoes, whatever.
That's why I love river trips.
You're not carrying the weight.
Yeah, being a river guide, you can stack the stuff out. You can carry those 3-burner Camp Chef stove things, Dutch ovens, take 4 of them and stack them up. Everybody loves that trick. So
I like that. So you just stay on the water on a boat or on a skiff and bring pretty much what you want.
Right.
Are these protein bars, fruit bars, granolas, are those still pretty much like I need to bring these?
Not for a snack if you like them.
Yep.
But yeah.
Okay.
I think Snickers bar is the best granola bar though going. So I always bring.
It is. I would carry a Ziploc bag full of the little sticker menus.
Yeah.
All right. That's very cool. Okay, I've got to ask this too. Then, speaking of food, I'm a coffee guy, so I have to have my coffee wherever I go. Are you guys both coffee drinkers?
Same here.
I am not, but there are a lot of there. That's another option is that they make the little mini presses that you can take. I have friends that I go backpacking with, and they'll carry their little mini press into the
Yep.
backcountry, and they'll sit there and make their coffee right there in camp.
Yeah, the
I love
Lexan
that.
press is a good one, and then also you just take one of those little. You can buy them at the supermarket. It's a little drip cup thing, golden cup. You just
Yep.
put the coffee in the bottom, and it makes drip coffee right there, and it's a one cup at a time thing. But yeah, no, I'm the same way, Howard. I got to have great coffee, otherwise I'm cranky.
Yeah, well, we don't want you cranky. We don't want you cranky. So, if is there a well, actually, Clay, you had shared a lesson learned for me because I tend to pack a lot, thinking, okay, I have to have on everything to wear for one per day. And you gave me a sage piece of advice when you and I were chatting prior to my trip, and you said, Howard, however many days, bring half of the clothes that you need because you can wear it multiple days and you can wash it. By the way, I did wash, but I never got anything dry. And I don't know why it was in Alaska,
That's Alaska.
but
That's Alaska.
oh my God, I didn't realize that. But I had two carabiners and I had like a 12-foot of cord between the two. And I think the room was maybe 12 feet wide. So I was hanging the carabiners and the line between. And so that's where I would hang up my clothes. But what other advice would you give for someone, uh, give to someone who is planning like a week long trip? I mean, just not having to carry everything was just like, wow, this is great. This made the travel a lot more palatable.
Well, I know Rick worked with Eagle Creek. I think they make a lot of great options for, and a lot of other companies have expanded too to offer more options. And of course, cotton weighs a lot, and that was one thing I wore as an early backpacker. But as I've gravitated away from that, nylon and the synthetic fabrics, they just weigh so much less and they dry so much quicker, regardless of the environment. I would love to be able to do a carry on only, but for some of the trips I take, that's really not an option. I try to carry what I could not possibly replace at the destination, like a pair of boots that, fit, or a pair of shoes. I don't want to put on a brand new pair of shoes and then have to go for a 10 or 12-day trip once I get to somewhere. So I try to carry what I would feasibly need. It'd be like going on a ski trip and not checking your ski boots, but carrying them in your carry-on so that when you got there, you had your boots, not
Right.
having to go get some rentals and you're having to conform. And not usually when you find that thing that fits just right. But some of the trips I go on, like I went from one couple of years ago, I went from the US to the Canary Islands, and this was in December, and I was wearing sandals and shorts, and I went from the Canary Islands to Sweden to go sea kayaking. So I had to carry stuff for basically summer to the middle of winter for two different adventures. So a carry on wasn't an option. I mean, I had to carry on, but it wasn't an option to carry everything I needed. So I try to carry the minimum. Again, if you're going for 7 days, you don't need 7 pair of underwear. Carry 3 or carry 2 and wear 1 or don't wear any at all. I don't know. Whatever your preference is, but and wear the pants that are convertible so that if you're sitting around camp and you don't have to go change, that makes you can just put the legs on and you don't have to carry then a pair of shorts and a pair of long pants. You can just actually convert them. So I like to be adaptable to a lot of different circumstances.
I love that. By the way, I was wearing convertible and I had 2 pair in the bag and I actually didn't wear one of them. And then I had the synthetic shirt with the hoodie,
Yep.
that, and I think I forgot I wore one and I had like 3 and I didn't wear one. So I actually had 2 pieces of clothing too many, but everything else I used. So I was really proud. I used just about everything that I brought.
But how many would you have if you hadn't have culled it out? How much
Uh,
extra would you have carried?
I probably would have had an extra 10 pounds. And There was one pair of boots that I had. They were the rubber boots because I wasn't sure exactly why we needed the big over
Sure.
the calf boots, and I get it now. Though I think if I were to do this cruise again, I'd bring my own, only because mine were much more comfortable, and I felt a lot. I had much better balance with them with mine on that I had bought. They were called like bogs or something like that. Than the Alaskan tennis shoes. They're because I just did not feel comfortable. But except for that and those pieces of clothing, I was cool. I was cool. What's your
Couple
thought,
things
Rick?
to Yeah, a couple things to add to that. One is, also bring things that can do multiple duty, right? So you can wear like the zip off short pants and long pants. That's multiple duty. Shirts that can layer, and then that layer piece is pretty important too, because if you just bring one big heavy jacket, then you've got that one heavy jacket. So if it's not quite cold enough for that, but that's all you have, then you're going to be a little warm. But if you bring layers, you bring a light fleece layer, and then kind of a little mid-wear fleece, and then another maybe light down, and then your heavier rain jacket on the outside. It doesn't weigh as much, easier to pack, and all those things together do the same thing on a really cold, blustery day. So
Yeah. There was one piece of equipment that I didn't bring, I wish I had, is a hanging around the neck, a little, I don't know what you would call it, put your cell phone in. It had a
mm,
clear cover,
Yeah, like a little,
uh,
just like a pouch.
pouch.
Yep.
like
There
a plastic Ziploc, yeah.
Yeah, when I was kayaking, they were double kayaks, and the woman who was behind me, she was doing the steering and I was providing the muscle. She wanted me to reach back and grab her phone and take a picture, and I said, "Nope, I'm not doing that." 'Cause I know where that cell phone's gonna be going, but I wish I had had that, 'cause that I would there was a couple places where I mean, I couldn't have my big camera unless I was on a skiff, or on the boat or on shore, but, that I think that was one thing I wish I had had, because that would have allowed me to take a few more pictures. So I am curious, guys, as you look back, I mean, you've done a lot more traveling, a lot of great experiences, and I know what you're gonna continue to have those. But as you look back in the work that you've done, whether it's writing or in sales, and Rick, now you and I are podcasting, what have been some of your aha moments? You kind of look back and you go, "Wow, I get to do this." Clay, what's your aha moment?
Ugh. Uh, I'm gonna kind of piggyback onto Rick's one because Antarctica was very dramatic, and we got when we're on a smaller. If you'd have been on a large cruise ship, like the 4 or 5 thousand people, they don't get to go ashore because it's limited to the number. So it has to be the smaller cruise ship. So we have to go ashore every day, and of course they were down a sea kayak guide, but I was certified, so I got to go on shore or go out multiple times a day. But I think one of the big moments was is that, and of course, when I say swim, I was only in the water for a few minutes, was walking in at Half Moon Island, walking into the water. And it was like, I think it was a chin strap colony, chin strap penguins, and walking into the water. And all of a sudden, all of the nerve endings start to go, they start to go numb. But then you get up to your neck and you go below the water. But I think the aha moment was the penguins didn't touch you, but you could feel the water column change as they would like little torpedoes going past you. It's just one of those moments. And then all of a sudden, then all the sensory neurons come back and then they're screaming. It feels like thousands of needles stabbing you because they're realizing that you're in water that's 31 degrees. But then coming out of the water and laying out there in the sun's pretty intense, and just laying there, swimsuit, I mean, a swim trunks, nothing else, no shoes, no, neoprene or anything, just a pair of baggy shorts, and walked right in and came back out. But then once I dried off, it was a beautiful moment. I didn't even get dressed for a time after that, just because the sun was so intense and it was still 32 degrees outside. But I think that that was one of those moments that you just remember.
Okay. I love that. I love that. How about you, Rick?
Yeah, similar thing. I mean, I think it's and usually when you're struggling the most is the moments that you remember the longest and the best, because it forces you, whether it's elevation that you're going through or something. I have really bad knees, and when I got to climb Mount Rainier with the Jansport group years ago, and I was not worried about getting up because I bad knees, I can go up all day long. But I was very, very concerned about coming down. And going up was like climbing a ladder for hours. It was just steep and icy and took everything you had to get there. And then you had to turn around and come back down. And it took me longer than everybody because I had to go slower. And I was beat to shit that night. My knees were, I don't think they've ever been so sore. And everything was, you can, going up there on that mountain and seeing the view from the top and seeing all the things on the way up and the ice and the glaciers and coming back down was just spectacular. So I think all those things that you do, there's always something out there that's going to make you appreciate it. And I remember the pain in the knees, but I don't exactly remember it now because it's all the other things that I remember were so great about it. So all those things that at the moment you think you're going to die, you forget about that once you get to the top and you see the beautiful sunrise or whatever it is. So it's just same thing in Kilimanjaro. We did the same thing there and got there to see the sun come behind us and the shadow of the mountain on the valley below us, which was just another amazing sunrise. So those things are just unforgettable.
I love that. I'm curious, you guys, in your travels, what kind of cameras are you taking
I
to
used to
capture
take
that
my
moment?
I used to take my DSLR most of the time, but now I take my phone. I think the
Okay.
iPhone is, if you learn the tricks of the iPhone, it's the best camera you have. But
Okay.
the best you have is the one you have with you. So whatever you're going to take it. But the
Uh-huh.
iPhones are amazing these days.
Okay.
I would just say that the best piece of gear is the gear that you're going to use.
Right.
If your phone's accessible and you're going to take more photos with it than if you have to get into your pack or whatever else, I think that that's probably your best option is to use your phone. I mean, yeah, they take great photos. They shoot TV worthy video that you can, use and, share with TV stations. So it's high quality. So I think that whatever
Shoot
you're
raw,
going to
yeah.
use,
Yeah.
whatever you're going to use and to capture those moments is probably going to be the ones that's most accessible.
Okay. I appreciate that advice. And it's something to think about for Tennessee next week. Do I really want to take a humongous 100 to 400 millimeter lens? I'm thinking, I don't know, but something to think about. Before we head out, one last feature of the show is what we call Insight to Go. And again, you guys with your background, and here I am. I'm late to this outdoor space. So, but I sit at a desk. I coach. I do my podcast. I have to remember to get up and go out on adventures. So, what's your insight to go for our listeners, just given your experience and your love of the outdoors and adventure? Rick, why don't you kick us off here? What's your insight to go?
Just go. I mean, whether it's you have the opportunity to go on a big adventure like Mount Rainier, Antarctica or something, go. Do whatever you got to do. Quit your job if you got to do. I mean, I've quit jobs to go on some of these things. But just go because it changes your life in ways you won't know until you get back, and sometimes ways you won't know until later. And seeing the world is a magnificent. Seeing the world is a magnificent thing because of all the not only the scenery and the wildlife, but the people you meet and the different cultures that you get to experience. So yeah,
Okay.
if somebody invites you, say yes.
All right. I love it. Clay?
I'm going to paraphrase a Jack Kerouac quote where he would say, nobody's going to remember how many hours you worked or how many times how manicured your lawn was. You're going to remember those moments, those aha moments of being out there. So I think he says, go climb to that mountain, just
Okay.
get out there. And as Rick said, just go. I mean, I did the same thing. I would back in the 90s, I would work a job, and I even taught for several years back in the 90s. So I had my entire summers and I had Christmas breaks. And every time I had these long breaks, I was gone or I was backpacking, even if it was just a weekend. I would leave from the school on a Friday afternoon. I'd be backpacking all weekend. It didn't have to always be a grand adventure. It could just be getting outside and just for a weekend or an overnight. It doesn't have to be a spectacular expedition. It could be just just getting out and taking in your local area.
Yeah, go for a walk.
By the way, Clay, that hits home a lot. Let me tell you, because I've got Mount Charleston just north of me. I've got Red Rock and Death Valley to the west of me, and I wait for the weekend to do my podcast work, and I'm thinking, God, I should just be out there. One of my goals, and I'm going to do it once the summer ends, is and I've slept out in Death Valley before, but I need to do it again. I need to do it at least a couple times a year to wake up with this beautiful sunrise and enjoy my cup of coffee. So I love it. Just get out there and hike up that mountain. I know there was
Work definitely gets in the way of a lot of
yes,
things.
it does. I don't know why it has to be
Of
that
everything.
way. I don't know why. So listen, guys, I appreciate you guys taking the time to kind of get together and kind of, as Rick had said, spitballing it. But I think it was a fun conversation. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I know I enjoyed, listening to your stories and just being a part of this conversation with you guys. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. It's great.
Excellent. Hey, before we do head out, Clay, is there a website, a social site that you want to send
Yeah,
our listeners to?
It probably needs to be updated some, but clayabney.com, you can check out some of my writing and I'm hoping to get that updated soon, but there's still ways to just type in Clay Abney, writing, and you can find some of my stuff on Men's Journal and Matador Network. And, there's different outlets where some of my stuff is still, up there. And
Perfect. And Rick, it goes without saying where we're going to send our listeners to, but where should our listeners go if they'd like to learn more about you and your work?
Probably the best place is my website, ricksaez.com. It has the podcast. I think there's some photography work still up there. And yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you both for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. And I hope we get to perhaps do this again. I hope we are all in the same room and we can break bread again, have an adult beverage or whatever it is we want to drink, and just share some stories. So
again, a great sunset.
Yes, very good, very good. All right, I'm going to do a real quick close and we can have a final chat, okay? All right, folks, that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed today's episode with Clay Abney and Rick Saez. Great guys from that I've gotten to know from the Outdoor Writers Association of America, and really just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to adventures outdoors, the experiences, and really just getting ready for the experience, the clothing to bring, and how to prepare. Just these guys are just a wealth of information. Do go out and visit both Clay and Rick's websites and social sites, and we'll provide the links back in our show notes. As for us, you can find us on our website, outdooradventureseries.com. We are also on LinkedIn and Facebook on our Outdoor Adventure Series pages. And of course, you can find us wherever you get your podcast from. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. And we look forward to having you join us on a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.